Welcome to today's podcast interview. I brought on Tom Dardick. Tom, welcome.
Thank you, Heather. My pleasure to be here.
Please give listeners a little background. Where do you live and what do you do?
I live in central Pennsylvania now. I'm trying to move my business so that I can be more of a citizen of the world and kind of be one of those, uh, you know, digital nomad type of lifestyle. We're newly empty nesters, so aspiring to that. So hopefully be a little bit more in traveling. But what I do is my new company. I've been in the people development business my over my most of my professional career. My consulting practice has been around people strategy. Over the past few years, I've developed this model you can see behind me called the Eye of Power and started this year a company around that, which is designed to help leaders systematically increase the engagement of uh, their staff, the people that are on their team. And so we have a sustainable, scalable ability to sort of make that part of how they work together. And we think that's a powerful way that people can, um, you know, increase engagement. I don't know if you saw, but in 2022, the Gallup organization came out with a worldwide engagement study, and the picture is not too good. About 3 in 4 people report some manner of not being engaged in their work. In the United States, it's a little bit better. It's 2 out of 3 aren't engaged. So 1 in 3 people are actually engaged in their work. And I think that
Yeah.
we can do a lot better than that.
But you know what? Like, even more on the personal level, I feel like so many people, because we're not happy or we feel stuck, that we've gotten addicted to being distracted and have no presence in our life.
Hmm. Yeah, so it's not just the circumstances of say the culture of an organization. You're saying it's also what people are bringing to the table themselves as they come to the world of work. So I think that's a great observation. And so
Yeah.
the question is, okay, what can we possibly do about it? And so that's an answer is what we're trying to do with the Eye of Power.
Let's start at the top because in our pre-call we talked a lot of different things, but obviously I'm extremely passionate about mindset. And something that you shared multiple times was this idea of you want to help people get off the sandbar, being
Mhm.
stuck, sitting on the fence, not taking action. I think about it, that insanity loop. Can you explain more about the sandbar and these negative narratives that keep us stuck?
The way that I often talk about it, Heather, is I'll ask people, have you ever made a New Year's resolution and then not keep it? And most people can relate to that, right? They say,
Yeah.
yes, okay, I've done that. And the question is why? Why can't we just decide to do something and then do it? And if you think about it, well, it's kind of a hard question to answer. And the reason that it's a hard question to answer is because we're complicated. We're more than meets the eye. When we look at ourselves, we see the picture that we can only see with our conscious mind and given the language tools we have. And it's to me, the best I can tell, it's we see the part of the iceberg that sticks up out of the water, and we don't really see the 80-90% that's under the surface.
Yeah.
And we're like that as human beings.
Yeah.
There's more to us than meets the eye. So when we decide we want to make this change and we know we want to make it intellectually, but for some reason we can't, a lot of times it's because we don't know what we don't know, but it's also a couple other things that are going against us. One thing is we are not rational creatures. We're kind of rational, but we aren't moved by rationality. What we are moved by is emotionality. It's how we feel that actually changes our behavior.
Yeah.
And the way we feel, since we're also social creatures, is related to our relationships, how we see ourselves as it relates to the interactions we have with our families, our friends, our coworkers, the world in general. And so it's through these very kind of filters, let's call them, that we try to view the world and we don't see particularly clearly. So that's the dilemma. And what we try to do to fix that. So if you're feeling sort of stuck on a sandbar, my first thing is Number one is, well, get some help. Don't try to get off the sandbar just by yourself. We
Mm.
can't see what we can't see.
Yeah.
No one can see their own blind spots, and none of us know what we don't know. And that's just part of being human. It's not a character flaw. It's not a problem with you. It's how it is being a human being. And I think it's a beautiful thing, actually, that we do need other people. We actually do need other people. You cannot thrive without other people, and we need each other. Isn't that good? so
Yeah.
I get kind of happy about that. But there's some things that come along with that, and that is that if we need other people, we have to allow ourselves to be helped by other people, and we have to allow ourselves to see what the actual problem is within. And we have to take a little bit of an inventory of what's real and what's not within the
Mhm.
stories that we tell ourselves.
Yeah.
And the closer that our models get to, let's call the greater reality that we can only sense, we only have stories about it. We never have the ability to know what the world actually is. We only have our ability to tell ourselves, okay, it looks like this to me. But the closer, the better that picture is, the more power, the more of our individual agency we're able to get because we're able to see and take actions that end up having real results. And so that's the process that we're all in. And so that's my answer.
Okay, so I love using the idea of an iceberg, and that's literally, I was writing things down before you even said that. And I was like, we're on the same page. But let's talk about that. So, the statistics I've read or seen is that 92% of people fail at New Year's resolutions. 92% of people don't see things through. So that means less than, 1 in 10 people might achieve what they set out to. And it doesn't even have to be New Year's resolutions. So what I see it as a surface level, if we go to the iceberg, well, let's talk about the few things I wrote down is number one, self-sabotage. Number two, we might indecision. And number three, we might lack clarity. So can we talk about like these different factors? And then obviously below the surface is the mental programming and our beliefs and emotions and all that that's like driving the behaviors. But can we talk about those three big ones? Self-sabotage, indecision, and lacking clarity.
Well, I'd say they're all related, first of all. All three of those things are related. In the Eye of Power model, you can see the chart behind me there. You might not be able to see the actual pieces of it. Um, but it's a description of the range of our personal power. So what can we do in this world? Well, we can think and we can act. And what we think about affects our actions, and our actions affect how we perceive and think things. So it's really this related spectrum of how we perceive and how we behave.
Mm.
And then along that spectrum, whatever we decide to do is going to be directed either towards ourselves or towards other people. So that's the horizontal axis that you see in the chart behind me. And together, those two things create what I call the power grid. So that's sort of the playing field of the game of life.
Okay.
And when we talk about self-sabotage or the lack of clarity and so forth, um, this is it's problems in what I would call the perception quadrant. So that is going to actually be um, the way we think about ourselves in the world. So it's related to the others. There isn't a clear, none of these things are clear and always just in one spot. Everything is more complicated, which is why it's harder to see these things and why we have a tough time keeping our resolutions. But the map kind of helps us because we can point in, we at least get the beginning of the strand, so we know where we start our process of untying the knot. And so it's the perception quadrant. So it's what we believe directed about ourselves. So that would be this bottom sort of sector right there. And what I call the corrosion layer, sort of the inner layer, is confusion, right? We don't see things clearly. We have these stories about ourselves or the world that don't actually match completely. Now, the problem that we all face, Heather, is that most of our stories are based on something. They're based on some aspect of reality. So there's generally a good amount of truth to them. but it's that little sliver that's not true. So they always say like the best lies are just maybe 2% wrong and about 90% right because they're harder to detect. And so most of the way that we get into in our own way is because we believe things that are sort of true about ourselves. So let's just take it for an example. Let's just say I struggle with weight. Let's just say I'm trying to drop, you know, 30, 40, 50 pounds or more. I might think that, well, I just am like that. That's how I physically am, and I have a slower metabolism or whatever. I'm just like that, and there might be truth to that. You might have a slower metabolism than your sibling or somebody you're comparing yourself to, and there might be truth to that. But is that completely true that because you have a slower metabolism that you couldn't possibly take steps to move in a what you call a positive direction? And the answer to that is no. So, it's an example like that where oh, I'm not. Let's say you don't want to be in front of a crowd and give a public address, right? You don't want to give the toast at a wedding or something like that. They say that public speaking is one of the biggest fears we have, right?
Mm.
And why is that? Why would somebody be afraid to speak in front of a group? And it's a deep-seated fear of rejection is what that is, right? So the belief that we have there is, well, I might say something that others think is not good, and therefore that's not a good thing. I might have reputational risk. So that's probably the belief underneath that. Well, is that true? Yeah, it's true. Kind of. It's not really true. First of all, most people are on your side anyway. You have way more leeway than what you think you do, right? In those kinds of situations. So, in other words, the truth is always a little bit more nuanced, a little bit more uh, fleshed out than what those basic fears are that when we lean into, we stop. We just say, no, I'm just not doing it.
For me right now, like the neon flashing light is get out of your own way. And I even hear people say, I want to get out of my own way. Those are the words coming out of their mouth. So those are the thoughts. I want to get out of my own way. I want to get unstuck. I want to lose the weight. I want to be financially free. I want that thriving relationship. But then their actions keep them stuck. So then we stay in this insanity loop. How do you break
Yeah.
free?
Well, so one of the things, and we talked a little bit about this as we were preparing for our talk today, Heather, is um, the idea of doing the same thing over and over and trying to expect different results and so forth. It's not a good plan, right? Um, the problem that we all have is that we cannot see our own blind spots. We do not know what we do not know.
Yeah.
And so, yes, I'm in my own way. Yes, I think, and you might even be able to put some very good descriptions to it. Yeah, I know I always defeat myself. I get right up to the plate. I'm about to swing and I drop the bat and go get an ice cream. And and I do it every time. And you might be able to have that self-understanding, but you may be fuzzy as to why you're dropping the bat, why you're moving in that direction at that time. Even if you intellectually understand it, um, the behavior pattern is kind of in there and it's there for a reason. We have we think of ourselves as this one thing. We say I, thinking it's this whole. It's not the actual truth of it. The more nuanced model is we are a community of beings inside of ourselves in terms, the 2-year-olds in there, the 13-year-olds in there, the one the one that had this experience is in there, the one that had this other experience, and they don't agree on everything, and it's this sort of conflicting thing, and it makes it a bit of a mess.
Yeah.
So the answer to the question is people want to believe in this sort of, oh, well, if I get this one thing, or if I hire this one person, or if I try this one method, or take this one pill, or this one diet, or we were looking for what I call a belief in magic, right? We want the secret code that unlocks everything. And I think that's a bit of a limiting belief. because I think the power is in the things we do on a regular basis. It's the boring stuff. I call them sustained incremental actions, SIAs. It's the little things that you do sustained over time, the disciplines that you can sustain that provide, just like in a savings account or an investment account, where you just set it and forget it, and it's not paying off a whole lot. Maybe, let's just say it's 5% interest. Doesn't look like a whole lot. And then down the road, you see, wow, that's a huge difference. It's 20 times. And I think that's sort of how life works. I think if we just do the little things and sustain it over time, it's a surprising amount of difference. It's not dramatic. You don't see it like immediately, but a year or two or four down the road, you say, wow, I'm in a completely different place.
Mm.
So my answer to people that feel frustrated that they're stuck or even trapped is to do the things you can do and sustain those things.
Let's give some examples. What are some of these examples
Sure.
that people think, oh, those small habits won't change my life? And it's like, no, that's the thing you have to do.
Sure. So one of the big things that changes our life experience is the quality of our relationships. That's true in all aspects. No matter what you want in life, the quality of relationships is going to positively or negatively impact whatever that goal is. So that to me is a really good place for us to focus on. So how do we improve systematically the quality of our relationships? Well, one thing I'll say is if you are a better listener, you're going to have better quality relationships than if you're not as good a listener. Make sense? So working on our listening would be one of these sort of key habits that I'd say that if you get better and better at that, your life is almost certainly going to get better and better. And so what could you possibly do? Well, uh, people probably have heard of active listening. And that's a skill. It's sort of like typing. It's a skill. It's something that anybody can do if you just work on it and try. What is active listening? Active listening is actually a decision and a discipline. And it's one that if you get in the habit of making and practicing, you will find yourself having higher quality, better relationships. And so it's like a cheat code. Um, so what does that mean? Just for those that aren't familiar, I'll just quickly. Um, Active listening simply means making your agenda, no matter what the conversation is, because it's really easy when somebody's talking to you about something into. You're actively listening naturally then.
Yeah.
It's when they're telling you something that you heard before, you don't agree with them on, don't have time right now. It's in those situations where the discipline is required to make the decision to either actively listen or not. And I'm not saying we can actively listening in every conversation, no. But a sustained incremental action could be I could decide that every day I'm going to have at least two examples where I've decided to actively listen, and I'm going to keep track of them. So that would be an example of how you could do that. So that means that in two conversations I have today, I'm going to park my agenda and I'm going to make my agenda completely understanding what the other person's saying. So that means whatever they're saying, I'm going to listen. If I have an opinion, I park it. I don't share it. I don't put my mind towards that. I just want to understand what they're saying. So I'm going to ask questions to clarify. And at the end, I'm going to, in my words, say back to them what they're telling me. And they get to say, yes, you got it, or no, you don't.
Yeah.
And you keep doing that until they say, you got it. That's what active listening is. So do that twice a day from now on, and I can guarantee you're going to have a better life. That'd be an example.
So you highlighted the power of relationships, which I agree, but I think even more important, if you don't understand or have a good relationship with yourself, you can't have a relationship with others. Like we could talk about, and I don't want to go too far down the rabbit hole, but if you're not self-aware and you don't become aware of your patterns and you keep attracting the same kind of circumstances and relationships, uh, it's an inside job.
Well, yeah. So um, I don't mean to say that there's only one thing that you have to do to fix all your problems. That's gonna there's all kinds of manner of things that we can, and guess what? Never going to be done. right? You're always gonna find something that you're gonna be able to work on, and that's the fun of life. So
Yeah.
I'll say on that one, because it does get very despairing, right? When you feel like you're stuck, when you feel like you're trapped, it's probably one of the worst feelings in the world. And it's that way for a reason. We're not supposed to be stuck. We're not supposed to be trapped. We're supposed to actually express the wonder. I'm going to start crying. You're supposed to express the wonderful, unique being that you are. That's what you're supposed to do.
Yeah.
And when we don't do it, it feels bad. It feels really bad for a good reason. And that reason is you're robbing not only yourself, you're robbing the world of what you can do for the world.
Yeah.
And so it's one of the biggest misses, sins. The word sin is exactly right because that means to miss the mark. So one of the biggest sins is to tamp down the full expression of who you authentically are. That's why it feels so horrible. So
Yeah.
if you feel at any way that you're stuck in that place, the answer is to take inventory of the things that you care about, that you happen to have some natural interest in, that you happen to perhaps have a little bit of skill in. And what I say, Heather, is that you might not be the fastest. You might not be the most charming. You might not be the best looking. You might not be the tallest. You might not be the most experienced. You might not be the smartest. Whatever metric you want to put yourself up against other people, you're going to find people ahead of you no matter what you choose. But you're going to find some combination of things that only you have. In that combination, there's not a single other person in the world that has it in that combination. And it's that combination of attributes, attitudes that represents your unique basket of gifts that you're there to give the world. And that's what your job is. That's what you're supposed to do. And that's why when you do it, you start feeling fulfillment. That's what our job is. So it's start to get out of that dark place,
Yeah.
take an inventory of what you're good at. What do you care about? Lean into it. You don't have to jump to the top of Mount Everest. That's the other thing. You don't have to cure it overnight. You just have to move in the direction. Let's go to base camp one.
Yeah.
Let's just move in that direction. And it's going to feel 100%. It's going to feel like the difference between night and day because you can see the new day ahead.
I want to share with you what you just talked about, what really resonated with me. One word, it's authenticity. And for some reason, this keeps being a repetitive pattern in content I've been consuming. So clearly, there's a point in all of that. Now, my own personal experience, and I'd love to hear yours. I chased societal norms. I chased what I was told would make me happy. So I climbed the corporate ladder and I had all the things. I made good money. I had a great job that I was bored to tears in.
Mm.
I found the guy, got engaged. We had just bought a house. Like I had all the things and I was still unhappy. I was not fulfilled. So I walked away from all of that. And guess what? When you're talking about take inventory of like your passions and values and what lights you up for your own personal expression, because I feel what most people have done is we got put into this, what I call a boring ass box, what we're supposed to do, the cultural norms. And the reason so many of us, we could talk about midlife crises, is because you've been climbing the wrong ladder. And so for me, I walked away from all of that. Sure, there was fear. What am I going to do? I have no idea. But there was also, which we all have access to, that internal voice, that nudge that I was meant for more. And guess what? I remember, I think it was my seventh birthday. My dad built me a playhouse in our backyard. And I loved being the teacher. And still to this day, every August, I go to Target and I freaking love school supplies. But anyway, that passion and that dream of wanting to be a teacher, I pushed aside in college because I was like 35 grand a year. That sounds horrible. So I chased the money and status and other things instead. And anyway, long story short, when I walked away from all of that, I have now stepped into a teaching role through podcasting and coaching. I'm constantly learning. Like I love what I do. Is it easy? Is entrepreneurship easy? No, I call it personal development on steroids. But I could never go back to playing small, going through life's motions, same shit, different day.
Yeah.
So if you can relate to that or other people who realize, you know what? Yeah, I've been playing small and chasing someone else's definition of success. I'm ready for a new reality. Where do they begin?
Well, that's a good question. What I say is a look in the mirror. I always say that
Mm,
everything starts in your seat, right? We are the authors of our story. Now, you might not feel like that right now. You might feel like your story has been written for you in the ways that you were just describing. You can relate to that. I think most people can relate to that to
yeah.
some degree or another, in some way, fashion, or form. Because look, it's a hard job being a human being, right? Because you're starting as a kid. The way we develop is really kind of messed up in a lot of ways that you think about it, because we go through these, we don't know anything when we're born, and our parents are imperfect. They're doing the best they know how, but they're going to make mistakes. The people around us, they're human beings that make mistakes, flawed. And when we make these mistakes, we do these things, we cause harm and a lot of injustice. And so we feel these things at a very deep level, and we create coping mechanisms for them. We think we're not worthy. We think we're not valuable. We think we're unseen. We think we don't matter. We think all these, people might call that head trash, but I don't know anybody who has zero head trash. It's like you don't grow up in this world without some bumps and bruises, and some of them are pretty damn nasty. And so, we got to give ourselves a little bit of a grace here, right? I mean, you're doing the best you can. So
Yeah.
you start where you are, and that's fine where you are. You put down the bat. You don't have to smack yourself over the head. It does. Nobody's paying that price but you. So, so give yourself the grace. You are where you are. And guess what? All the things that you're labeling as bad, as wrong, as hurtful, as all the problems, they have silver linings. They have gold. They have value. They're a price you've paid. And that price is valuable.
Yeah.
It's part of the unique person you are. And some of these prices are extremely high. And I don't want to make it seem like it's super easy to turn these things around. It's not. That's why it's that 92% of the people that make a decision can't. I mean, give yourself a little break. It's not an easy thing to do. So but having said that, once you decide, and when I say decide, I mean really decide.
Mhm.
Because part of the problem with the New Year's resolution is you think you made a New Year's resolution, but you really didn't.
Yeah.
You think I mean, this is the problem with the rates of divorce too. People get married, they think they're getting married, but they really didn't. They're trying marriage on for size, because marriage means we don't break up no matter what. That's what actually marriage means. Now, there's some circumstances where you have to. I'm not trying to criticize people who are divorced. I'm just saying that a lot of people make promises or make commitments, and they're not really a full 100% commitment. They might not even know how. They might not have ever learned what a full commitment actually is. So that's a skill. That's a thing to work on, a developmental piece. You talked about, being an entrepreneur as being in the world of professional personal development. And absolutely. I mean, we're all works in progress.
Yeah.
But I want to go back to that person that's feeling stuck right now and feeling trapped. And your trap, your pain, all of that stuff has purpose. So the way out is to take inventory. So that might be things like hiring somebody like Heather to work with you. Uh, you know, Getting a psychometric instrument to look in the mirror as far as what are the things that I'm not seeing. Usually the look in the mirror is it's really one of four ways. It's an actual look in the mirror. So you look in the mirror and just think about yourself. That's one. Another one would be like a psychometric tool that is designed to help us see those parts of ourselves that remain hidden. There's tons of them. There's thousands of them. They
Yeah.
all are models. They all have their advantages and disadvantages. None of them are perfect, but they can help us. The other ones though are people. People who know us and people who don't know us but are professional, that are trained, that are good at this skill. So both of those are valuable things too. People who know us can be mirrors, kind of dangerous mirrors, because they think they know us, but they don't really know you. They have their picture of you.
Yeah.
So when you're using them as a mirror, what you're really seeing is their picture of you, which is good information, but you can't take it to heart saying it's the truth. It's only what their narrative about you is. So you can get that picture and put together some sort of composite. And then the final one, the professional, that's a really good one because that's somebody who has seen the classic things. They can shorten, they can't change you. They can't change your fate, but what they can do is collapse your time frames. They can you can avoid stepping on this landmine or that landmine. You can go further faster with the help of somebody who knows what they're doing. So those are the things that we do to sort of take inventory to move from where we are. And no matter what it is, out of the, I'd say use them all because they're not mutually exclusive, right? So
Yeah.
all four.
Yeah.
Um, but whatever that is, you don't. The other thing I think messes people up, Heather, is they see a whole bunch of possibility and it's like, oh, I'm going to do these 10 things. You end up doing none of them because it's too much. So what I said earlier about the Mount Everest, right? You don't just jump up to the top of Mount Everest. That's a bad plan. No one's going to make it. We got to plan for base camp one. We got to do the thing, and I go back to the sustained incremental actions, right? So that's the SIA. So in the Eye of Power protocol, what we do is we just make weekly sort of bite-sized chunks, and we use accountability growth partners. So we say, okay, this week I'm going to do this, and you only do what you can actually do. So you don't do something that's going to take a ton of energy and you leave no bandwidth for all the stuff that's going to happen that week. You do the things you can actually do. So that's to me, I don't know of a bit of a better or alternate path than the actions you take and sustain over time.
So many avenues I could go on. I want to emphasize a word. I want to emphasize a word that you shared, and it's to decide. And I think in Tony Robbins' world, he shares you got to burn the, I'm just going to say it, you have to burn the
Yeah,
fucking boats
yeah,
because that's
yeah.
people don't. And then you're sitting on the fence. And but when you decide, when you go all in, there's a question I ask potential new clients. Are you committed to change or are you interested? Because if you're
Yeah.
interested in losing weight or you're interested in bettering your relationship, when things get hard, you won't show up because you might not feel like it. You might not feel motivated. When you're committed, when you decide, and so the two words I wrote down in addition to that is like when you're committed and you decide and go all in, now you have focus and intention. And like you shared, what can I do this week? What can I do today? How do you run a marathon? One step at a time. So, even on that note, can we give one tangible, practical exercise? Because I think in the world of personal development, what happens is people get so overwhelmed. Just what is one thing individuals can do starting today to create clarity, to help them decide to get off the sandbar?
Well, I'll share the thing that we start with the Eye of Power protocol, because this is the one that this is the sandbar, the trap that we all are in. And I want to say one more thing about that too is you can be doing fantastic in 20 areas of your life. That doesn't mean there isn't an area that you couldn't pay attention to and get better at. So when we make these judgments about ourselves, um, we can fall into two traps, right? We can be too harsh on ourselves, saying we're a loser or don't count and all this, and just self-recriminate. We can fall into the other trap, saying, "Oh, I've got it figured out. I don't have to worry about anything." It's like,
Yeah.
well, if you
Eh,
think you don't have work to do, you have work to do, right?
yeah.
I mean, like 70, 80, 100 years is not that much time, right? Compared to how much work there is to do on ourselves in this world. The world is very complicated. So no matter where we are. So I'll say we can all do this. In the first this quadrant right here, I call that the pain quadrant. That's the actions we take on our own behalf. That's what we're talking about. Actions on our own behalf. That's sort of the starting point because um, we can go learn things, we can talk to people, but really it comes down to what we do. That's going to determine how our days go, how the results we put on the board. It's really going to come down to the actions we take. So that's the starting place. So why don't we take actions? Well, the corrosion in that particular quadrant is consternation. And consternation is a type of fear. And it's the kind of fear around worry. And so what we do is we say, if I do this, then I'm going to have to give up this, or this bad thing might happen. And you might be right. You might be factually right. Like if you do this, you're going to have to give up this other thing, and that's true. So remember, I talked about we don't move emotionally. I mean, we don't move intellectually. We move emotionally. So this is the problem we have, right? Because uh, we can reason about this, and every single person can agree, but it doesn't mean you're actually going to do it. And so this is why we end up being stuck because we're not really committed. So that commitment piece, I always talk about the chicken committed versus the pig committed, that story, Heather, for breakfast. So
Mm-mm.
chicken committed is you give the egg for breakfast, right? Pig committed is you give the bacon, right? Different kind of commitment, right? So that's the kind of a picture here. So the question is, how bad do you want it? And the universe has a kind of a way of asking us that. So the the if we say, okay, look, what are we going to do? Well, the exercise we do is we take inventory of what the fear is. So this is a quite big, long kind of not big, long, but a questionnaire that a set of questions that we walk through. But the bottom line there is, what would I do in this case if I wasn't afraid? If I didn't have the fear, what would I do? And then the action that we ask you to take is, okay, what's one thing you can do to move in that direction and actually do and sustain over the course of a week or two? And so if you're listening to me right now, answer these questions to yourself. What's the one thing that you would do if you weren't afraid? What's the thing you could do over the next week? Let's say 2 weeks, if you weren't afraid. What could you actually do? And take into account all the things that are true in your life right now. You have to go to work. You have to do the reports that are assigned to you. You have a project you're on. You have the bandwidth you have. You've got the kids. You've got spouse. You've got all the various. You got to take all that into account and realistically say, okay, look, I can do these things and this thing in 5 minutes. I can do that every day.
Oh,
Okay, let's choose that. And then you, like you said, commit to it. So that means that you're gonna, like, usually when I say commit to it, what I say is keep a record of it. Because then you could, now we're creating evidence. We're creating a paper trail. We're creating something that's tangible. Like,
yeah.
yes, this is true. It's not, I thought I did this, or I think I'm doing this, or because our brains play tricks on us. So we have to be disciplined in that way. So I'd say take a journal out, and at the beginning or end, whichever suits your current reality of the day, whatever you decide your action is, review that action. Yes, it went this way, or no, or I'm going to do this, and then stick to it. And that's whatever it is, do that. And I know that's a little bit sort of amorphous, but that's the basic thing. And so
Mm.
if you have a tough time getting your mind around that, what I'd say is get somebody to help you. So call up Heather, you know.
So what you touch on here is fear, and fear is what holds a lot of people back. Fear of failure, fear of the unknown. And I'll just share real quick, because I shared with you in the pre-call what I've done with fear. But I remember going to quit corporate, I delayed it and delayed it and delayed it because there was so much fear. And then other people's, why would you leave a stable job? Why would you leave, because that's their conditioning and programming to be a nine
Sure.
to fiver. So I had to listen within. But anyway, how I overcame my fear of quitting and going into the unknown was I talked myself into it. And I was like, okay, what is the worst case scenario of quitting my job? The worst case. And I was like, well, the worst case is I'd have to get another job. And then I was like, oh, is that so bad? So, for example, I hear this a lot, especially people on LinkedIn hate their job, but fear of failure keeps them from taking a risk of starting their own. And I'm like, failure is just part of it. You have to shift that. That's a paradigm shift in perspective. And I want to like get in and fail fast and fail early because fail is first attempt in learning. So anyway, like I shared with you, when I feel the butterflies, when I feel the fear, it's like, oh, that is my indicator. That's my next level, my next step. And the only way through past fear is through it. So I just want to offer individuals when you feel that fear, go towards it because number one, then it falls away and the growth and like that's what we're here for. But just like start small and it's even like I remember people have so much fear about like going out and doing things by themselves. I've traveled the world by myself, but I was afraid to go to a movie theater by myself. So what do you
Hmm.
think I did? I took myself to a movie by myself, and then you get over yourself,
Exactly. You realize it's not that bad. The movie's still the movie. It's pretty fun.
right? Who cares? All right,
Yeah.
here's what I want to know. And I love asking individuals this. What are some of your daily rituals that helps keep you forward focused and showing up to do the work?
Okay. Well, first of all, I don't want to present myself as somebody who has everything figured out and I have no areas of improvement.
Yeah,
So, number one, I would never try to put myself up on some sort of pedestal in that way.
yeah,
I wrestle with a lot of the same things that everybody else does. But I do have some things that I found do help me. Um, when I wake up, it's almost always 7 o'clock, no matter what time I went to bed. It's always the same time. And the first couple of hours are always what I call energy, healthful energy practice. So what does that look like? We do yoga, we'll take a walk, I'll read, um, possibly some meditation. It's not the same on every single day. Sometimes I'll go to the gym during that time. So it's a variable, but it'll be some combination of those things. Then and it gets interrupted if I have a breakfast meeting or something like that we couldn't make another time. I will make an exception here and there, but that's the default setting that we sustain. And really, it is those things. It's you have to feed your soul. So walks in the woods. Getting now, if you live in a city, maybe that's a hard thing to sustain and do. But I'd say don't go too long without connecting to some sort of nature. I think that's super important. And if not nature, then beauty of some kind, because our soul needs nourishment. We need to have just like you need healthy food, your soul needs, I think it's beauty, but it needs to feel like the world um, is a worthy and wonderful place. You need to cultivate a sense of curiosity and exploration, of childlike playing.
yeah,
Like take your example of switching jobs. It could be this fearful thing, but it could also be just an experiment. It could just be fun. Like, all right, let me try this fun thing. You don't know what it's going to be. There'll be some things you don't like, but there'll be some things you do like. So let's just lean into the fun side of discovery,
yeah,
right? And without the judgment, because that's a lot of where the fear's coming in, right? It's the judgment of things, um, which is another part of the model. But anyway, so so those are the things that I generally do. Where I give myself good marks is that I have leaned into my passion. The Eye of Power, I just started a new company around it this year, but up to that point, I've been a consultant. I've been in the human development, I've been a student of the human condition my entire life, and I've leaned into that for a long time. So I've never felt like I am doing something that I don't care about or that I don't think matters. I've always felt like that. I might not put as many points on the board as far as, okay, I wanted to get this big client, or, I didn't, I have just as much frustration as anybody else. But the work itself, if I'm just sitting there with one person and it's making a difference for them, that's actually enough to fill my cup. So I don't really have it doesn't take a lot to feel that sense of fulfillment. Um, so so that's what I do for myself. But I also, the creative side of things matters too. I'm a musician. I'm a writer. So I had a science fiction novel come out a couple years ago. My youngest brother and I are working on its sequel. I'm trying to build my platform up so that when I get the next one out, there'll be more people who know about it. And so uh, I think it's good to lean. So it doesn't have to be this one thing, is my point there.
Yeah.
I think you can lean into whatever, wherever your heart goes and your soul goes. I think it's wise to lean into that and explore and play.
I love explore and play. And what I just wrote down was multifaceted. And the idea of just experimenting, I'll share real quick because then, I
Yeah.
want to wrap up the interview. But
Yeah.
I've tried many different things. I loved photography, so I got into portrait photography. Turned out I hated it. It was so stressful. I hated portrait photography, but I love landscape photography and I do it for
Mm.
myself. Then I think I'm on like my fourth business venture. But again, I just kept trying things and then I was like, nah, I don't really like that. But I've always come back to personal development, growth mindset, learning, and like I'm just passionate about this. So I love what you shared and the idea of being curiosity. You can reinvent yourself anytime you choose. We are not, static. We are dynamic. So like, yeah, stop playing small and holding yourself back. Here's what I want to ask you because we've touched on a lot. What do you believe is a key takeaway you want listeners to get?
Well, I think what we've been centered on, Heather, is the idea of not accepting. If you're sitting there feeling like you're stuck in any way, and you might feel great in one area of your life and feeling stuck in another. So if there's any sort of feeling of stuckness, what I would say is don't tolerate it. I'd say you're only stuck because you're tolerating being stuck. So that goes back to that decision that we were talking about, right? It's make a decision. We've told you what to do. It's not hard to understand here what to do. It might be hard to do it here. And so if you want to take away one thing, I'd say care about yourself enough to not tolerate the feeling of stuckness.
You know what I say all the time while on my social media is whatever you are not changing, you are choosing.
There you go. Perfect.
But
We're singing from
tolerate.
the same hymnal.
Yes. All right. Love this. To wrap up the interview, I have a few rapid fire questions for you.
Okay.
What is a quote or motto that you live by?
I do I have to choose one? Because I like the four agreements.
Oh, yeah,
You know,
that's good. Share that.
so the four agreements are be impeccable with your word, which is easy to say, hard to do. Take nothing personally, make no assumptions, and always do your best. So together, those four things. This is Don Miguel Ruiz, who that's Toltec wisdom, and it's that's those four things. Easy to say, hard to do. But if you work on those four things, I've been working on them for 20 years, and those are the things that make the difference for me.
That is one of the earliest personal development books I read as a teen. And that saved the one, don't take things personally, saved me a lot of heartache in my teens and 20s. Oh, but yeah, that book's phenomenal.
There you go.
Well, on that note, darn it, what is a book you are currently reading or highly recommend?
Okay, so obviously that'd be a big one. I'm the kind of person that's in the middle of a bunch of books at the same time, depending what mood I'm in. Uh, and the one I was just reading today is not one I wouldn't necessarily recommend it. It's called The Devil's Chessboard, and it's about Alan Dulles, who is the guy who kind of formed the modern CIA. And so that's sort of I'm not recommending it. I'm just that's what just happens to be what happen to be reading right now. If you haven't read the Four Agreements, do yourself a favor. It's easy. It's an easy read.
Yeah.
Um, it's definitely do that one. Um, there's so many. I always have a tough time with this one. Um, it depends on the person where you are, but that's a pretty universal one.
Final question. What advice would you give your younger self?
That is a tough one. You don't have unlimited time.
Mm,
Make each day count.
yeah.
I think I could have used my time a lot more wisely than I have.
Yeah. Great note to end on. Tom, thank you so much for joining me.
My pleasure, Heather. Thanks so much for having me.